When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be continuing on our reread, and for all of you guys that took last week off because it was a brand chapter, I don't blame you. But we're getting back into Catelyn, and it's kind of surprising that she already has 4 chapters in this book, before some characters even have 2. I think it's really interesting the way George puts a lot of emphasis on Catelyn early on in this series. So this chapter is going to be all about introducing us into King's Landing, to some of our big players, and this is kind of like the foreshadowing to what Ned's going to have to deal with in King's Landing, because in this chapter we're going to meet Littlefinger, we're going to meet Varys, we're going to meet what castle we're even at, and how this castle works. Nothing is a secret, and we're going to see what things undo Catelyn that are so minor on face value that end up kind of blowing up in her face. Because if you guys remember where we left off with Catelyn 3, she's supposed to be on this kind of secret mission. She's secretly supposed to kind of figure out what's going on with this dagger and then get out of there. They don't want anyone to know they're there. That doesn't go well, as you guys know, and we're gonna talk about it in this video. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow. If you feel that might like this content as well. Let's get into it. We're going to start on page 165. So the chapter begins with the captain of Catelyn's, that is a tough little sentence to say there, the captain of Catelyn's ship, saying that they will make King's Landing within the hour. Now, I want to note here what's interesting about this ship. And as we talk about in this first page, is that this is a very large ship. This isn't like one of those, oh, this is a ship that maybe some poorer people would take, or maybe some people that are less important would take. This is a full galley. Like, this is not some tiny ship. And I get why they take this ship, but at the same time, if you're going for stealth, this wasn't the best idea, because it's going to draw a lot of attention. Like, and this is, I think, exactly why they get undone, outside of the captain sells them out, basically, is that why would you come on such a large ship? And again, I think this chapter really illustrates how Catelyn is very similar to Cersei to a degree, where she thinks she's smarter than she is. And this is kind of one of those chapters that really shows, like, Catelyn is not that smart. Like, she's, you know, average intelligence, I feel like, but she's not making the best decisions here. And Catelyn notes that they have done well, and she offers extra compensation for the oarsmen. And so she's going to give them all, I think it's like 1 piece of silver or something like that. It ends up being 60 silver later on. And again, if this ship is this big, like I talked about, how is this going to accomplish your mission of a secret mission? That's one of the things I really pick up on that doesn't make any sense. But Catelyn notes that it was probably maybe for the best, because the wind has been going against them quite a lot. It was difficult to get through the fingers, and also, you know, going around Dragonstone, they hit a big storm. So it's probably better for speed and not dying that they took a bigger ship. But again, if you're going for stealth, this didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And that's going to get us into page 166. So moving into page 166, we see how this has been taking a toll on Roderick. Now, Roderick is deathly ill at this point. He's getting very seasick. And I want to point something out, because I've seen other YouTubers or people in the community point this out as being this evil sin of Catelyn, that she took Roderick on this boat or whatever, even though that he didn't like sailing. That was just part of the job. There wasn't really any way that Catelyn could have made it to King's Landing going by land, because she wants to reach there before Ned does, which I think it makes more sense, because the city would be less crowded. There would be no Lannisters really there. It makes sense to want to do that. And they kind of only could achieve that by going with a ship. So I definitely understand why Catelyn makes that decision. I don't think that's like one of those, oh, Stoneheart moments. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out as well, because that's my differing take on that. And Catelyn and Roderick then are kind of left to talk. The captain goes away and lets them talk. And Roderick apologizes for not being the most valiant protector. And Catelyn, I think, is the way I would be in this situation. It's like, what protecting? Like, we've just been on a ship this whole time. Like, you're okay. We got here safe. It's fine. And that's kind of how that, like, plays out. But we see that Catelyn, like, really is worried about losing this blade. She constantly throughout this chapter is like checking if it's still there and all these things, and She's looking at her scars on her hand because, again, she still has those deep scars from getting cut from the assassin. And they start to kind of talk about what they're going to kind of do, like when they get to King's Landing, like what is the plan? And the idea here is they're going to seek out the Master of Arms to figure out whose blade this is. Now, it makes sense why they have to do that, but again, stealth-wise, I do find it a little weird that they're going to go to the official Master of Arms of King's Landing and have nobody kind of question this. So again, I think the idea of this being a secret mission is fair on impossible, especially with how they're going about it. Maybe if they had done it a bit differently, but again, that's just not the way it's going to go. And that's going to get us into page 167. So moving on, Roderick says that he has been thinking, and this, I think, is a really logical statement. I don't understand if Catelyn thought this was going to go any differently, but a lot of people would probably know who Catelyn is, or there would be questions raised to who she is, why she looks so highborn, why she's coming in on this great galley. And I think it makes a lot of sense that Catelyn should just kind of hide out while Roderick actually does the investigating. And that's what Roderick suggests, right? And Catelyn even notes that, yes, someone like Littlefinger, who would know her very well, would notice who she is. So again, this makes a lot of sense. And Catelyn starts to note that he is now Lord Baelish, and that he was a ward of her father, Hoster Tully, and had gotten the name Littlefinger from Edmure, because again, Littlefinger is very small, he's not very large of stature, and he also lived on the Fingers. Catelyn then notes that Littlefinger was always like a brother to her, so my boy Littlefinger got friend-zoned, basically. But he wanted more, and he even challenged Brandon for her hand, to which Catelyn had to beg him not to kill him. Now, this brings up a couple points, because one, it introduces us into who Littlefinger is as a person, and introduces a little bit of his backstory as well, so that we'll understand why he does things later on in the story. And this is one of those moments that should kind of pop up into your head, like, should we, especially when Ned meets this character, should we be trusting Littlefinger? He is this character that has spies everywhere. He's someone in a whorehouse that runs whorehouses. He is someone that apparently got friend-zoned by Catelyn, and then Ned's older brother severely injured him. These are all those little subtle signs that George throws in here to give us background information to not trust Littlefinger. And afterwards, after this duel, Littlefinger even more was sent away. And Littlefinger eventually sent a letter to Catelyn, and she apparently never opened it because she was already married to Ned, and she just assumed basically what it was, that Littlefinger wanted to ask for her hand in marriage and that he loved her and all these things. It's probably what it was. We don't know if this is actually true, that she never opened the letter, but I don't see why she would, I guess. But yeah, so moving on. Roderick notes that he is now on the small council. And something that I think is very interesting that comes up here is that Catelyn says she knew he would rise high. He was always clever. And my question here is, where did she come to that conclusion? Because Littlefinger, maybe he was clever, whatever, is inherently stupid when he's at Riverrun. He doesn't really become this smart character until after this event, like after Catelyn stops knowing him, really. So my question is, at what point did Catelyn know, oh yeah, he's going to be this really important dude that's able to move up the ranks? He's someone that's stupid enough to challenge Brandon Stark to a one-on-one. Now, I guess it was blinded by love type situation. He then got Lysa pregnant, which, again, probably unbeknownst to him because he thought it was Catelyn, but either way, he was going to sleep with Catelyn when they weren't married. So he's not exactly a clever person, in my opinion. At that point, right? He becomes a clever person after. So I think it's interesting that Catelyn, like, thinks that, when I really don't know. Like, yes, he played clever games or stuff like that when they were kids, but that wouldn't really incline that he would become Master of Coin. I thought that was a very odd statement that Catelyn makes in this chapter, but that'll get us into page 168. Catelyn now sees King's Landing, and she notes that 300 years ago, there was a small town here, and now it is a large city with the entire shore filled with buildings. Now, this is something I want to point out because we've really only known Winterfell up to this point as a big castle. And we even got this little hint from Jon when he was talking to Arya that this is a big place. It's much bigger than Winterfell. There's a ton of ports. There's ships everywhere. It's a large city on 3 different hills, as we'll talk about, with Visenya's Hill being crowned with the Sept of Baelor, which is really ironic when you think about it, because Visenya didn't really like the faith. Her son Maegor is the one that really goes against the faith. So it's interesting the way the Sept of Baelor was put on Visenya's Hill. It kind of seems like an insult to her memory. And we learned that Rhaenys Hill had the dragon pit on it and has not been used for years because there's no dragons. And this is also going to be the part where the Maesters will use the lie that the dragon pit killed the dragons, which I've talked about in many videos, that it doesn't really make any sense, just based upon, if you look at the Dance of the Dragons, there was still like a dragon pit then as well, and dragons are still growing really well. So again, doesn't make any sense, but that's for a different video. But Catelyn notes how crowded the docks are, with hundreds of ships all right below Aegon's Hill and the Red Keep. And again, we're given this really great description of the Red Keep, how insane it is. It has 7 great towers, loads of archer nests. We really get the feeling of a mighty castle that would be difficult to siege. And all of this was completed by Maegor, who killed everyone that worked on it and vowed that only the Dragon Lords would know all of its secrets. Interesting, because in reality, the dragons are not even the ones that know the secrets anymore. For instance, Viserys didn't know really the secrets of it. Daenerys doesn't. We would assume if young Griff is a Targaryen, he doesn't. Jon doesn't. So then it kind of comes to people like Varys knowing it. Maybe Varys is a Blackfire, so maybe you could say he does have Targaryen blood. It's interesting, the way that kind of is what Maegor's goal was, and it basically faded out of existence. But yeah. So again, we're just given this major description of the Red Keep and of King's Landing as a whole, and of some of the Targaryens as well. Maegor, I believe this is our first notable name drop of Maegor, and it's interesting the way Maegor went into extremes at times, and I can understand, like, you can understand why Maegor did this, but it is a very cruel action, hence why he is named Maegor the Cruel. And this gets us into page 169. Nice. So getting into page 169, we now know, with all this being said, all the Targaryen history, that a Baratheon flag now hangs over the castle, not a Targaryen one. And Roderick offers a lot of wisdom. He says, oh, I guess I messed this up earlier. So at this point now, Roderick then offers that he will go forth, find the Master of Arms, while Catelyn waits. Which makes a lot of sense, because Roderick, again, is someone that's not going to be easily recognized. It is made very apparent that Roderick has lost some weight from not eating and probably throwing up. And also, he actually shaved his whiskers off, which is mighty unfortunate. That's all I have to say. That's a shame. I mean, there's a lot of tragedies that happen in this story, and that's one of the big ones. And so again, I don't think many people would really notice Roderick, so again, that makes sense. Now, there should be massive red flags here. So as they're docking into King's Landing and the ports, there should be red flags as to the trustworthiness of their captain. Because when the captain brings up the payment, and Catelyn, says, okay, these extra silver, the 60 extra silver, they're supposed to go to the Ordermen. The captain tries to make an excuse to keep the silver, like, oh, the men will spend it on brothels or alcohol or whatever. And this kind of shows that inkling that this is someone that's not very trustworthy. Even Catelyn notes this, right? And that she's refuting this, and even later on in the next page, we see that Catelyn actually gives the silver to all of the oarsmen. So let's think about this logically now. There's 2 different things I want to point out here. One, anyone on these docks could see that this woman is going around just giving all of her silver to these oarsmen, which shows, again, upper class. So again, that would pique the interest of anyone that was spying here. 2, the second idea is that Catelyn even knows that this guy is untrustworthy and doesn't give the silver to the captain, but then goes to the exact place that the captain says they should go to. It really is mind-boggling how Catelyn can be so smart and so dumb at the same time. That's Catelyn in a nutshell. That's why I find her chapters so interesting, because she is in my opinion, one of the most human characters in the story, where she can do something really smart, recognize something is dumb, and then at the same time do something extremely illogical. Like, she is one of the most human characters in this story. Doesn't mean I like her as a person, but yeah. So that gets us into page 170. So again, page 170 starts with Catelyn responding to the captain saying how they spend the silver is up to them. You know, they earned it. But Catelyn even goes a step further, and she gives the silver to the oarsman herself. And then, this is the thing that really bothers me. She asks the captain, like, where they could stay, where's a good place to stay. And also, she is then escorted to this inn. So not only does the captain know where they're staying, they're escorted. How many, like, this shows you how high class they are. Like, nobody's getting escorted here if you're just a common person. So again, more red flags. Because if you've already seen Catelyn giving all the silver, and then you see them getting escorted, you're going to follow them to try and figure out who they are. Especially if you're a spy for Varys or Littlefinger, which Catelyn should know, which she doesn't. And again, shows a lot of her lack of care towards keeping this mission a secret. But Catelyn is happy to find out that the inn keep doesn't really care about their names. They just care about getting paid and whatever. You can go wherever. And then Roderick tells her to stay in the room, and he will go and get the Master of Arms before nightfall. And during this point, Catelyn falls asleep. And then she is awoken to a pounding on the door, and they say, "Open in the name of the king." And that gets us into page 171. So page 171 starts with Catelyn as she opens the door to find that they are the city watchmen. Now, this is another key point, because this is something that we are going to realize as we get into Ned and later into the chapters, that Littlefinger has the city watch under his thumb. And Catelyn in this moment asks who sent them. And that she instantly notes that from this note that they are sent from Littlefinger because of the Mockingbird sigil. They basically tell her she is supposed to be escorted to the castle. But what I find interesting is she notes so soon. Like, in her head, she's like, so soon. So the thing that I don't understand here with Catelyn is there's a couple ways you can interpret this. And I know Order of the Green Hand, I know I've been referencing them a lot, but this is one of the chapters I really remember vividly watching their reread on, is they take this as Catelyn knew, like, Littlefinger was going to find them or expected it. But there's a couple things you could maybe point out. Was she expecting to be found this early? Had she planned Littlefinger to discover her? Or was it just simply that they found her so quickly? And I think these are all logical outcomes. I would lean towards Catelyn just knew that she probably was going to be found at some point, but I don't think she realized that it was going to be this quickly and how many blunders she's already made. Because again, every step is being watched. It's something that Marjorie kind of does really well, I feel like, especially in the way that they show her in the show. It's something that Catelyn really just doesn't get. And so they start going up to the castle with the city watch. And again, this is only Catelyn. Roderick is out trying to find the Master of Arms. So that's a little bit different than the show. She tries to kind of figure out in her head how somebody would have figured out that they were there. And she instantly realizes that the captain sold them out. Now, that is true, probably, just based on what we saw. But at the same time, the captain didn't even need to sell them out. I mean, it's quite, like, obvious if you just, from spying, that Catelyn was a highborn person. And then if you just go with, oh, you just walking by them, you'd probably be able to figure it out. So I don't know. I think Catelyn just makes a lot of errors in that regard. She then goes to the castle with the men and is escorted to a tower. And when she gets to the top, or she gets inside this tower, she finds Littlefinger sitting there. And Catelyn obviously is kind of pissed off. She's asking Littlefinger why she was brought like this and insults him on his courtesy, to which he says he never meant to. And that gets us into page 172. Continuing on into page 172, Catelyn thinks of how Littlefinger physically, he hasn't changed much, which is not a good thing. Like, think about this. The last time that Catelyn saw Littlefinger, he was very young. He was still a teenager, and he's now a fully grown adult, and he's still not grown much. He's still someone that's very short, not physically big. He's the exact opposite of the men that Catelyn goes for, basically. But she then asks how he knew she was there, and he responds, Varys knows all. And he will be joining them soon. He wanted to see her first. Again, it kind of goes into the idea that Littlefinger has some sort of feelings for Catelyn, and he wanted to make that known. Now, also, again, Varys knows all because Catelyn made it obvious. Let's point that out there. But then Catelyn then says, the spider knew I was here then. And it's like, yeah, Catelyn, duh. No duh. Like, I don't know. And Littlefinger cautions her from using the name, that he is prickly, but yes, he knew you were here, but not why. Which makes a lot of sense. Catelyn hasn't really made her purpose here well known, and it's quite odd that she would be here from an outsider's point of view. Think about it. Bran has just fallen. He's in dire shape. The last we hear of Catelyn, she's in this really awful state. Now she's all of a sudden here in King's Landing. So we know that something had to have pushed her, but we don't know what. Now that's the interesting question for someone like Varys or Littlefinger. And the interesting idea here is, why would Varys then tell Littlefinger? And I think it does make sense because Littlefinger is the only person on the small council still in King's Landing. And this is one of the key reasons why Catelyn went this early, is because, think about it, Renly is not here. Barristan is not here. The king is not here. Ned, who is now the Hand, is not here. Stannis is not here. So again, it makes perfect sense why Varys would come to someone like Littlefinger in that scenario. And that gets us into page 173. Now, page 173 starts with Catelyn trying to make excuses for why she is here, but Littlefinger sees right through her and says that this is something urgent, and at this moment, there's a knock on the door, and Varys enters. And again, Catelyn, it's hard to make any excuses here because of coming all this way in the circumstances like I talked about. It's kind of hard to make an excuse that Littlefinger would buy here in this moment. Now, as Varys enters, he's described as very queerly. He is plump, hairless, powdered. He is this very kind of appalling person to look at, because on the outside, he's wearing a lot of perfume. He's doing some things to make his appearance a little bit better, but we know that he's kind of rotten to the core, which kind of shows us a lot about Varys, where on the outside to people, he's trying to be very helpful. He seems very kind, but on the inside, he's none of those things. And that is exactly exemplified in this chapter with how Varys treats Catelyn. And they then start to speak about how tragic Bran's fall was, and Ned is going to be a great man for the Hand. Again, it's just this idea of Varys kind of buttering Catelyn up is what this is. And Varys has this idea, which he always does. He does this to Ned as well. He makes himself useful, saying he can get healers for her hands or for Bran, to which Catelyn is getting annoyed and refuses. Again, but what does Varys do here? He gives her options for being useful to him. And that is something that Varys constantly does, and it's the reason he's still alive, is because he's made himself so useful. Now, we know, and now we get to the point where Varys has kind of been buttering up Catelyn, trying to make himself useful. He goes, what about the dagger? And basically, Catelyn is stunned to find that anyone knows anything about Roderick's mission. Don't really think she should be that surprised given how quickly she got found out, but you know. Catelyn shows the dagger, and Varys cuts his thumb because of how sharp it is, and Littlefinger says he knows the dagger, and that there's only one dagger like this, and it is his. And that is the big, interesting part of this chapter, is that we figure out, okay, again, on a first read anyway, that Littlefinger had this dagger that was used to assassinate Bran. But everything to this point has kind of led you to not trust someone like Littlefinger and Varys. And when we get to the last part of this chapter, which is going to be, you know, page 175, where Littlefinger says that he lost the dagger betting on Jaime to beat Loras, and then Loras won. And he lost the dagger to Tyrion, which makes no sense if you really decipher this lie. It's a very flimsy lie when you think about it. One, why would Tyrion A, bet a Valyrian dagger, and how would he even have a Valyrian dagger? 2, why would Tyrion not bet on his brother? That doesn't make any sense either. And if you think about House Lannister, something they've always wanted, they always have wanted a Valyrian sword. So you're telling me that House Lannister, with his Valyrian steel dagger, they would bet it away, and also that Tyrion would be in possession of it? If they had a Valyrian steel dagger, Tywin would just take control of it. That would be like their thing now. Doesn't make any sense at all in this lie. And maybe you can make excuses for Catelyn, like she doesn't really know Tyrion that well. Again, I think that's kind of a flimsy thing, especially when you look at, oh, apparently Tyrion hired someone to kill Bran because apparently Cersei and Jaime were banging in a tower, and then Jaime pushed Bran, so he's defending his... Again, it doesn't make any sense because it very much contradicts itself that Tyrion either supports his family with Jaime or doesn't. Again, and Tyrion, I think, is falsely just accused, and Catelyn believes this because of Tyrion's reputation. But if you really look through this, you should be able to tell that this is a clear lie. But she doesn't, and that's to her own detriment, and it causes a ton of issues. Now, that is the end of the chapter. Now, that is the end of the chapter, but it again shows us Catelyn can be such a smart and dumb character at the same time. Also, I want to bring this up at the very end of the video. My boy Roderick in this scene, in this image, he's got that side eye going. He's eyeing up that worker right there. That's all I'm going to say. But thank you guys all for watching. I think we have Jon next. Is it Jon or Ned? Yeah, we have Jon next. So we'll be doing Jon 3 next. We're really getting into some of my favorite Jon chapters, so I'm excited to get into that. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.